There was a period when Elon Musk was working close to 22 hours a day, 7 days a week. He wasn't going home. He was sleeping inside the factory, in the paint shop, in General Assembly, wherever that day's crisis happened to be. When he was asked if he worried about breaking under that kind of pressure, he didn't dress it up. He said flat out, nobody should work like this. It's not something he'd recommend to anyone. He said it was physically painful, that his brain and his heart felt like they were being pushed past what they were built for. Stay with me, because the next thing he said is the part that actually matters. He did it anyway, not because he wanted to, because if he didn't, there was a real chance the company simply wouldn't exist anymore. That's the trait nobody talks about when they talk about success. Not the podiums, not the headlines. The actual trait is your body, your sleep, your peace, laid down on the table one day at a time. Because the alternative was watching something you built die. The boy who thought differently. Here's something about his childhood most people don't know. Growing up, he didn't understand why other people's minds moved the way they did. His own mind never stopped generating ideas, and for a long time, he thought that meant something was wrong with him. Not because anyone told him so, just because he could see other people's minds simply didn't work that way. They didn't explode with possibilities the way his did. Eventually, he found something that gave that restlessness a direction. He read a line from a science fiction writer that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and it clicked for him. 300 years ago, flying would have gotten you burned at the stake. Seeing across long distances, talking to someone on the other side of the planet, all of it would have been called magic. So he set himself a simple, enormous goal. If he could build things that felt like magic, things that genuinely advanced what was possible, that would be worth everything else it cost him. He never said it would be easy. People assume Musk walked into building an electric car company and a rocket company thinking it would work. He said the opposite. He expected both to probably fail. Starting a company, in his own words, is almost like having a child. You don't get to decide halfway through that you're too tired to feed it. Once it exists, you're responsible for it, even when keeping it alive is ruining you. In 2008, that responsibility nearly broke him. He had somewhere around $30 or $40 million left to his name, money that had once been enormous and was now nowhere near enough to save two companies at the same time. He had to choose. Put everything into one and let the other die, or split it and risk losing both. He's called it one of the hardest decisions of his life. He couldn't bring himself to let either company starve, so he split what he had left between Tesla and SpaceX, knowing it might not be enough for either one. Both of them survived, barely. The warning he gives everyone. Ask him what it actually takes to start a company, and he won't give you an inspirational quote. He'll tell you to expect pain. A friend of his has a phrase for it that Musk has repeated for years. Starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. You stare into the abyss because you spend your early years constantly aware that one wrong move ends everything you've built. You eat glass because you don't get to spend your time on the problems you find interesting. You spend it on whatever the company actually needs, even when that's the last thing you want to be doing. And that doesn't last a few weeks. It goes on for years. Most companies don't make it through that stretch. Tesla almost didn't. He said it plainly. Happiness is high when you start, then it drops as the real difficulty sets in. And it only comes back, if it comes back at all, after you've gone through a stretch most people never see. why he actually did it. So why put yourself through that? Because he wanted to build things people would actually love, by his own observation. That's rarer than people think. How many things in your life do you genuinely love, not just use? He wanted Tesla to be one of those rare things, something useful, made for people, that he'd enjoy building regardless of the reward. He's also been honest about the start of his career in a way that cuts against the myth. His first company wasn't born from some grand vision. It was born because he couldn't get hired. He tried to get a job at Netscape, sent his resume, even stood around their lobby hoping to talk to someone, and he was too shy to actually approach anyone. So he started a company instead, because nobody would give him a job. That's worth sitting with. One of the most consequential entrepreneurs alive started because the door was closed everywhere else. What he tells people who want to start something. His advice isn't complicated, but it isn't soft either. First, you need an unusually high pain threshold because the difficulty isn't optional. It's the price of admission. Second, you actually have to like what you're doing deeply because there's a real chance you fail even if you're the best at it. If you don't love it, the work will eventually crush you because you won't have a reason to keep going once it stops being fun. Third, when he says work hard, he means it literally. He's described the earliest days of his first company when he had no money, negative money by his account, buried in student debt. He and his brother couldn't afford both an apartment and an office, so they rented a small office instead, slept on the couch, and showered at the YMCA down the street. They ran an internet connection by drilling a hole through the floor to the tiny internet provider below them just to save on cost. He coded through the night. The site had to run during the day, so the only time left to build it was after dark. Negative feedback, and the cost of being told the truth. One thing he's insisted on, again and again, is the importance of seeking out feedback people don't want to give you. Friends will tell you what they liked about your product and quietly leave out what they hated because they don't want to hurt you. So he tells people directly, don't tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. That's the only feedback that actually helps you. Even people who don't like you, he said, can hand you exactly the truth you need if you're willing to hear it. SpaceX and the failures nobody remembers. Before SpaceX built a single rocket of its own, he flew to Russia 3 times, trying to buy old Soviet ICBMs. He was met with confusion, a young entrepreneur showing up asking to buy some of the biggest rockets in the world. He had the money, so they entertained it, but the deal never worked out the way he needed. So SpaceX started from nothing. The first 3 launches all failed. By the 4th attempt, the company had barely scraped together enough money and parts to try again. If that 4th launch had failed too, by his own account, the company would have been finished. He couldn't find a chief engineer good enough to hire, so he ended up doing the job himself, with no guarantee he was the right person for it. When a friend of his made him sit through a compilation of rocket explosions just to try to stop him from losing everything, he watched it anyway and kept going. Asked if he ever thought about quitting after the 3rd straight failure, his answer was immediate. Never. He said he doesn't give up, not unless he's physically incapable of continuing. Being told no by his own heroes. 2 of the astronauts he admired most, men who had actually walked on the moon and flown in space, testified publicly against a kind of commercial spaceflight he was building. He didn't hide how much that hurt. These were people he considered heroes, people who, in a real sense, were part of the reason he wanted to do this at all. He said he wished they would come see what SpaceX was actually building, in person before judging it from the outside. Watching your heroes doubt you is a specific, quiet kind of pain that doesn't show up in any headline. What was actually driving him? Ask him what was underneath all of it, and he doesn't point to money or fame. He said the real thing running underneath everything was an obsession with truth. That's part of why he was drawn to physics in the first place. Physics, at its core, is just an attempt to get as close as possible to the actual truth of how the universe works. That obsession shows up everywhere in how he talks about building things. He said the hardest part of being an entrepreneur isn't coming up with an idea. It's being brutally honest with yourself about whether that idea actually has merit, or whether you're just engaging in wishful thinking. Because human beings are wired to believe in their own ideas a little too easily. The people who succeed, by his account, are the ones willing to interrogate their own belief instead of just defending it.